It's not like when we were fighting the Cold War. Now, the Russians were tough, but...
They didn't saw our heads off on the internet. Blow up innocent people. Fly airplanes into the Twin Towers.
Come on, Saul.
What?
We both know 9/11 was a hoax. An Israeli-American excuse to launch a crusade against the Muslim world.
Honestly, I don't know what to say when I hear men of your deep knowledge and experience talk like that.
President Bush lied about Iraq. Why not 9/11?
Because it's nonsense. Like saying bin Laden's not dead. Abbottabad was a CIA plot meant to embarrass Pakistan.
So, tell me, Saul, what do you want from me?
I want a favor. Somebody to talk to at the ISI, somebody high up you trust.
What's this about?
Can't say.
My advice then is to drop it. Now is not a time to be trusting anyone inside the Intelligence Directorate.
Well, surely there must be somebody I can reach out to there.
Don't do it, Saul. It's not even your business anymore. Go home. Spend time with your wife. Garden.
I don't have a garden. But I seem to remember I do have an outstanding credit with you.
It's a little late in the game to be calling in a chit.
What do you mean?
It's over, Saul. You have lost. The Americans are being driven out of Afghanistan just like the Russians were. The Taliban has won, and they know it. And they will dictate the terms of the settlement.
Well, then, you can afford to be a little gracious, can't you?
And it's always good to see you. But it's also wonderful to see the blossoming friendship between our two beautiful wives.
I'm not going to talk to you about the Jonathan Pollard case, but I'm going to make a very dogmatic statement about it. In order to have any credibility in saying it, I need to give you just a little bit of background first. I am a lawyer, but I've not always been a lawyer. I was, for 6 years, a naval intelligence officer, and then at that point, the Navy decided I would be better as a lawyer and sent me to law school. I only had a couple of years as a lawyer before I had unexpected transfer orders to the National Security Agency. I was the first judge advocate to go to the NSA, and the reason I went, the director of the agency at the time was Admiral Bobby Inman, smartest man I've ever met in my life. And as soon as I got to NSA, he pulled me into his office and he said, I made a mistake in my life. I always went to one particular lawyer for advice. And we both made Admiral, and we never had time to talk to each other again. He said, I want you to learn everything you can about intelligence operations and how to support them with your law degree, and go out and train other people to do it. And so that was my direction at first. From there, after I left NSA, I got a second law degree, and then became the legal advisor to Naval Intelligence. Long story short, in my 27 years of active duty, I only had 2 assignments that were not supporting intelligence operations. And as I neared the end of my career, I came back from a tour as a diplomat in Italy, and I'd only been here a couple of months when the FBI came and said, we want you to come and do the same thing for us that you did in the Navy. So I spent the next 11 years in the senior executive service of the FBI. The reason I give you that background is because I have worked every major espionage operation between 1979 and 2009. And quite a few that weren't major operations as well. In my judgment, there are 4 espionage agents who stand out as the ones who did the most damage to the United States. Chronologically, they are John Walker, Jonathan Pollard, Aldrich Ames, and Bob Hansen, who I knew personally. I'd never worked the Aldrich Ames case. That's the only one that I didn't work because I was transitioning from the Navy to the FBI at that time. Now, why do I say that Jonathan Pollard is a major problem or did major damage to us? Background for him, as you heard, he was a Navy intelligence analyst. And he wanted to make a lot of money. And he had ideas about weapons schemes and things like this. But one day he was talking to a friend of his in New York who commented that he had met a very interesting person, a colonel in the Israeli Air Force named Avi Sella. And Pollard said, "Can you introduce me to him?" And he did. And right off the bat, Jonathan Pollard said, "I can help you. What is it you would like to have?" Well, Sella naturally had Jonathan Pollard checked out, and they realized that he was intent on what he said. And so they said, "Yes, we'll be glad to receive anything that you can get." Well, Pollard had a top secret SCI clearance, and he had a courier pass, so he could take classified information out and anything he wanted. And he started giving information to the Israelis. And one of the comments they said was that, "Don't give us any secret information. We don't need that level. Only top secret and SCI information." And so that's what he started doing. And because of his credentials and his courier pass, he could go to the various intelligence libraries and get anything he wanted. And pretty soon, the Israelis started tasking him with specific documents they wanted. And the way they were able to do that is they had a book that was published by the DIA that was basically a catalog of all the things that were available. And Jonathan Pollard didn't give it to them. They got that from somebody else. So Jonathan Pollard started giving them whatever they wanted. Now, just to recap for a moment what Bob Pollard was trying to do, he didn't start out to give information to the Israelis. He started out trying to sell anything he could, including classified information. He approached the Pakistanis, he approached the South Africans, he approached the Australians. He turned over classified information to a South African attaché just as a show of good faith. So, he's not a person who was trying just to help the Israelis. He was a pretty venal person here. At one point, when he was meeting with his handlers in Paris, he started commenting, I'm really taking a big risk, all this sort of stuff. I could really get a lot of time in jail for what I'm doing. It's a big deal. And the Israelis said, "Well, what is it you want?" He said, "Up it by 1,000 a month." So, this is really what he is. He's a person trying to make money. Now, what did he do to earn my suggestion that he's one of the top four? He took so much information to the Israelis that they had to install 2 high-speed copiers in an apartment to take care of everything that he brought them. He would take information out every night in a couple of briefcases, give it to them to copy, and then because they had high-speed copiers, they were able to get it back to him quickly, and then he would replace it as soon as he got to work in the morning. How much did he give them? By his own admission, he said, "I gave them enough information to occupy a space that would be 6 feet by 6 feet by 10 feet."
They're grooming me to work for the United States government.
That's
All
his
fantasies
admission.
of his spy imagination.
We never got
In
the
1984,
documents
his dreams
back from the
became reality
Israelis
when, as
that
an
he gave them.
intelligence
Now, they did
researcher,
give us a few
he had
documents
access to
back.
top
He gave us a
secret
couple
documents.
thousand back.
He was caught 18 months
But
later and soon
really,
became the only person
you know,
in
we
US history
don't
to
know
receive
all
a
that he
life
gave,
sentence for
although
spying for an
Jonathan
ally.
Pollard has a almost photographic
Israel, the
mind,
issue has
so
remained
he was
alive.
able to tell us
In
an awful
1995,
lot
the Israeli
about what he
government
did.
even granted
Now,
Texas
the reason he told us all this
citizenship
stuff is
while
we
he
made a
remained
deal
in an American prison.
that we would, his wife was involved in this too, and we made a deal that we would cap her sentence to 5 years, and that we would not ask for the maximum punishment for him. Now, the information that he turned over, some of it actually was information covered by 18 U.S. Code 794, which is mostly electronics communication information, carries the death penalty in it. But at the time that Jonathan Pollard did his espionage work, there was no death penalty in the United States. That had been ruled unconstitutional by the Supreme Court. And at that time, a life sentence was really in practice 30 years. So that's what we were looking at. Jonathan Pollard was pretty good about telling us all the information that he had given over. And as a consequence of that, one of the things that we do usually with espionage agents, or at least that I did, is I would write an affidavit for a senior officer to sign that explained what the harm was. So of the things that he gave us, I selected 19 different documents that represented the different categories of information that he had turned over to the Israelis. And just using each one, I explained what the harm is from this type of information, not from this document, but from this type of information, and gave it to Secretary Weinberger. And Secretary Weinberger made his edits to it. One of his edits, I have to tell you about this, one of his edits was he put in a sentence in there that said that if the death penalty were available, I would have no hesitation in recommending it. I crossed that out, and the next version I sent in to him, he put the same thing back in. And finally I said, Mr. Secretary, if we can't ask for the maximum punishment, which is life, we can't say that death is appropriate. He finally got the picture. But anyway, this affidavit was then given to Judge Aubrey Robinson, who's now deceased, and I took it to him personally. I sat in an outer room while he read it and gave it back to me and said, thank you very much. That's all he said. And then we went to sentencing. And at sentencing, the prosecutors really didn't say anything. They got up and they said he's done harm, he should receive a substantial sentence, but that's about the character of all they said. Jonathan Pollard got up and talked about what he had done and how sorry he was, and by the way, I really didn't do anything that caused any harm. And Judge Robinson said, come up here, young man. And he pulled out the affidavit, which he now had in his hand, and he pulled it open to a few pages, and he said, okay, now explain this one. And Jonathan Pollard couldn't answer what it was because it was a very big deal. In fact, it has been made public now, so I can tell you what Judge Robinson was pointing at. It was something that we call the Raisin Manual. And the Raisin Manual was at that time a document that described all of the communications capabilities of the Middle East and how the NSA could attack them. And Judge Robinson just said, explain this one, young man, and and he was done. So, at sentencing, Jonathan Pollard got life, which, as I said, meant about 30 years. He has been there for about 27 or 8 years at this point. He has been eligible for parole for some time. He will not ask for parole because he wants clemency, so that as soon as he steps out of prison, he can leave the United States and go to Israel. So that is my story of Jonathan Pollard. I am going to finish, it looks like 13 seconds early. So I thank you for coming here today. It's been a pleasure.
The people of Israel welcome the release of Jonathan Pollard. As someone who raised his case before successive U.S. presidents many times, I longed for this day. And now, after 3 long and difficult decades, Jonathan is being released. I wish him on this first Sabbath that he's going to spend with his family a lot of joy, a lot of happiness, a lot of peace. May these be the hallmarks of the rest of his life.
On visits to Israel, Maxwell was feted like a head of state, but Mossad had taken the precaution of being prepared should the proverbial hand that fed it suddenly withdraw its largesse. Discovering Maxwell had a strong sexual appetite, and because of his massive size favored oral sex, Mossad arranged that during the tycoon's visits to Israel, he was serviced from one of the prostitutes the service maintained for blackmail purposes. Soon Mossad had acquired a small library of video footage of Maxwell in sexually compromising positions.
Of numerous books on intelligence agencies and espionage, along with his co-worker, Martin Dillon.
All their numbers, people like Marcus Wolf from Stasi and KGB, CIA, he knew them all. And I think he saw before other people that software would be the thing, satellite observation and all this sort of thing. So he saw this job to fly around the world and talk to these men of the security forces, of these companies that they needed to get rid of the card system and deal in this. The only thing was that Maxwell had invented this and patented that there would be what he called a trapdoor within the software which would feed the information to Mossad and Israel. And this he seems to have done quite easily, from the CIA to KGB to the Canadian Defence Force to Africans and Mugabe and all of these people. He seems to have done it very, very well. The book takes us on through the 80s, when Maxwell went on this money merry-go-round. He kept needing more money, more money, more money. He was a billionaire by then, but I think most of it was on paper. But he was always very loyal to Israel and always trying to find opportunities to help them. Also helped many Israeli Jews, many Jews in Russia to escape, find sanctuary in Israel. But he got a little bit greedy, according to the authors of the book, that he started threatening Mossad that unless large sums of money were given to him to stave off his creditors from the world banks and so forth, he would blow the whistle on what Mossad was up to. And because of this, the highest form of government, probably the Prime Minister and probably the Chairman himself, ordered 3 teams to stalk Maxwell in the final months of his life, to arrange a rendezvous on the Ghislaine boat there. You can see Maxwell's super yacht, the Ghislaine. Wife Betty, long-suffering wife, of course, and there's the man, flamboyant as ever. He seems to know everybody around the world. Assassination of Robert Maxwell. Came across this book a few weeks ago, and they call him their Israel's super spy. A couple of investigative journalists wrote this. Impeccable credentials, of course. They've written many other books in the past dealing with these subjects. And I think most of the viewers will be aware of how powerful a man Robert Maxwell was during the 80s and the 90s. The 2 great press barons are, of course, Murdoch and Maxwell. But Robert Maxwell, I suppose, the most interesting, because he was such a flamboyant character, not only in the fact that he owned the Daily Mirror and several other newspapers, but he was a very great self-publicist. But the whole theme of this book by Gordon Thomas and Martin Dillon was that Robert Maxwell, who was born a Jew and always said he would die a Jew, did all he could to preserve the survival of the state of Israel. He was very much there from the very beginning, as the book tells us. It's a very long book, as you can see here, over, I think, 300 pages or so, and it deals with Maxwell's life and so, which I'm not going to go into, I haven't got the time. But Maxwell saw two things that the State of Israel had to survive, and the way forward in the late 80s and early 90s was software, which he believed could be sold through his company, which was set up in California, to the leading security forces of the world. I mean, he knew them all by first name. He had all their numbers. People like Marcus Wolf from Stasi and KGB, CIA, he knew them all. And I think he saw before other people that software would be the thing, satellite observation and all this sort of thing. So he saw this job to fly around the world and talk to these men of the security forces of these companies that they needed to get rid of the card system and deal in this. The only thing was that Maxwell had invented this and patented that there would be what he called a trapdoor within the software which would feed the information to Mossad and Israel. And this he seems to have done quite easily, from the CIA to KGB to the Canadian Defence Force to Africans and Mugabe and all of these people. He seems to have done it very, very well. The book takes us on through the 80s, when Maxwell went on this money merry-go-round. He kept needing more money, more money, more money. He was a billionaire by then, but I think most of it was on paper. But he was always very loyal to Israel and always trying to find opportunities to help them. Also helped many Israeli Jews, many Jews in Russia to escape, find sanctuary in Israel. But he got a little bit greedy, according to the authors of the book, that he started threatening Mossad that unless large sums of money were given to him to stave off his creditors from the world banks and so forth, he would blow the whistle on what Mossad was up to. And because of this, the highest form of government, probably the Prime Minister and probably the Chairman himself, ordered 3 teams to stalk Maxwell in the final months of his life, to arrange a rendezvous on the Ghislaine boat there. You can see Maxwell's super yacht, the Ghislaine, named after his daughter. There they told him there would be a pickup done, and there they said the money would be handed. That's how he started to make his fortune. There's the man there. In the background, his 19 million yacht, the Lady Ghislaine. That boat he absolutely loved, apparently, and of course that was to see his death and his murder by Mossad, so the authors claim. There he is with Mrs. Thatcher, whom he often described as one of his trusted friends. She certainly thought a lot of him too. There he is, of course, there with his wife Betty, long-suffering wife, of course, and there's the man, flamboyant as ever. He seemed to know everybody round the world, according to this book. He knew all the leaders, and it says that once he knew their telephone number, he knew it then, that was it, and he was in his memory. He didn't need to write anything down, and he could always say, I'm going to phone Gorbachev, Ariel Sharon, Prince Charles, Lady Diana. I rather like this picture here, if James can pan into it. Harold Wilson looks uneasy as Maxwell emphasises a point to Mikhail Gorbachev. Well, he might do, because he probably had a lot of things on, secrets on Harold Wilson that Wilson probably are not known about. There is the funeral. The man who saved the mirror. Maxwell's 506 million is missing from his firms, so the Daily Mirror proclaimed. And there's the family at the funeral of Robert Maxwell, in the Jewish tradition of the body wrapped in a talit. And there's the body being carried down to the final resting place, which for Robert Maxwell is on the sacred ground of the Mount of Olives in Jerusalem. The authors claim that this was very much part of what they call the Mossad magic. I'm not going to say how the murder happened. You need to get the book and find out yourself. But it's a very simple way that they were able to overpower this very strong man. It seems they'd done it in the past. They rehearsed the whole thing. But with Maxwell out, the problem, if you're finding more money, was secured. He didn't have to do it.
Affair was an Israeli terrorist operation in Egypt known as Operation Susanna, in which Egyptian, American, and British-owned targets in Egypt were bombed in the summer of 1954. In the early 1950s, the U.S. was becoming friendlier with Egypt and was moving to influence the British to leave the Egyptian Suez Canal, which they had manned for almost 20 years. The apartheid state of Israel would not tolerate the British leaving, and elements within Israel began planning a variety of terrorist attacks on British, Egyptian, and American targets. These attacks would then be blamed on so-called Muslim extremists. This would incite the anger of the British and the Americans towards Egypt and Islam and sour the burgeoning relationship between Egypt, America, and Britain. This plan for a series of false flag terrorist attacks was codenamed Operation Susanna. A group of Egyptian Jews was recruited to carry out the attacks. Jews in the diaspora that are recruited are known as Sayanim. The first bomb went off on July 2nd when a post office in Alexandria was firebombed. On the 11th of July, the Anglo-Egyptian Suez negotiations, which had been blocked for 9 months, got underway again. Despite the British assuring Israel that stockpiled weapons would not be given to the Egyptians, on July 14th, the Jewish terrorists firebombed U.S. information agency libraries in Cairo and Alexandria. However, that same day, a phosphorus bomb exploded prematurely in one of the terrorists, Philip Natansen's, pocket just as he was about to enter the British-owned Rio Cinema in Alexandria. His arrest and the subsequent confession led to the breakup of the whole ring. However, while the plot was being investigated, the Zionist Jewish terrorists started fires in 2 Cairo cinemas, in the Central Post Office, and the railway station. After the plot was uncovered, many tried to spin it as an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory. As the trial of the Jewish terrorists became more and more public, Israel was forced to do damage control. They claimed that the Egyptians were tipped off and allowed the attacks to happen. They also singularly scapegoated the defense minister Pinhas Levon to prevent the exposure of the real group inside the apartheid state of Israel who planned Operation Susanna and several other false flag terrorist attacks. But this would not be the last time America's so-called ally and friend and recipient of over $150 billion in aid would attack her.
Won't do to its friends as well as its enemies in order to get its own way. But I'm going to break a rule now. I mean, you mentioned 9/11. Basically, in public, I don't talk about it because it makes you such an easy target for abuse and false charges of anti-Semitism and everything, doesn't it?
I've certainly noticed that.
Yeah, so basically I have stayed away from it because it gives them a focus to take the attention away from your main message. But since you've raised it, I'll tell you what I honestly believe. I think it probably started out as an all-Muslim operation, okay? But I think it would have been very quickly penetrated by Mossad agents. Now, it's not a secret. I detail it in my book. From almost the moment Israel was born, it had its agents penetrating every Arab government, every Arab military organization, and every Arab terrorist group, whatever. So they would certainly have penetrated this. And my guess is at an early point, they said to the bad guys in the CIA, hey, this operation's running, what do we do? And the Zionists and the neocons said, let's use it. Now, what is true and what is false, I believe, is beyond that, is not arguable. The towers, the Twin Towers, were brought down by a controlled ground explosion, not the planes. Now, I tell you in passing that among the friends I have are consultants who work for the world's leading civil engineering and construction firm. I'm not going to name it. But they have studied the film for me, and they have said there is absolutely no doubt whatsoever that the planes were brought down by a the towers were brought down by a controlled ground explosion. And then we have the film of what is sometimes called the 5 Dancing Israelis. Are you aware of that, Kevin?
I certainly am, yes. They were celebrating the attacks. Apparently they had set up to film even before the planes hit, and they were high-fiving and taking pictures of each other, flicking cigarette lighters in front of the towers.
But the point is they all had mobile phones, right?
That's right.
Now, they were initially reported as being Muslims. Are you aware of that?
Middle Easterners, I guess, is the code.
All right.
For
okay, Middle Easterners. But the impression was that they were Muslims. They were the bad guys.
Right.
So the FBI gave chase. And these 5 guys, they tried to avoid being arrested. But they were eventually caught, and they were arrested. And guess what? They were all Mossad agents.
That's right. That was confirmed by the Forward. The
Oh yeah,
newspaper.
oh yeah. No, that's fact. So it opens a speculation. What were they doing there? It suggests that they knew the attack. It suggests at a minimum that they knew the attack was going to happen. It's not impossible, and this is Alan Hart speculating, that the planes were fitted with transponders and that these guys were calling in the planes to the targets. It's not impossible.
I suppose not. There are certainly all sorts of other possibilities, but the hypothesis of remotely guided planes, I think, is a very good one, given that if one had planned a very complex demolition of 3 skyscrapers, would have been the 3 tallest buildings in history ever taken down by controlled demolition, one would have to make sure that they got hit in order to justify that demolition.
And isn't it the case, Kevin, that quite a lot of your top pilots have actually said it would have been a bloody difficult job to actually drive the planes into those buildings?
Well, that's right. Yes, I've had a number of members of Pilots for 9/11 Truth on my show, and they have said that the clocked speed of these aircraft, which in the case of the one that hit the South Tower was nearly 600 miles per hour at sea level, is a speed that, well, some of them say that these aircraft, 767s, couldn't possibly reach that speed at ground level. They would be torn apart at substantially lower speeds than that by the air pressure of the much thicker air at sea level. But in any case, that nobody in their right mind could claim that it would be possible to guide a plane at that speed at sea level and hit those targets in the way they were hit.
So the speculation that they were fitted with some kind of transponder and they were called to the target electronically is not totally irrational.
Well, no, it's not, and in fact, it's even somewhat questionable whether normal passenger aircraft would be able to do that consistently at that kind of speed. In any case, it seems very doubtful that pilots who couldn't solo in Cessna would be performing these amazing aerial stunts to hit their target.
Well, that and 2 other things, Kevin. We know as a fact that at least 6 and possibly 9 of the alleged hijackers who died are still alive.
Well, that's right. That's been confirmed in Jay Kolar's article, What We Now Know About the 9/11 Hijackers, which was published actually in a volume by Europe's leading scholarly outfit, Elsevier. It's amazing. The scholarly literature on this is all so one-sided. There's no counter-literature except for
well, the only counter-literature, how dare you be so anti-Semitic? That's the only counter-literature.
Right. And then there's also Cass Sunstein's counter-literature published in, what's that, Harvard Law Review? He's a Harvard guy who's now advising Obama, and he wrote an article about how to deal with these terrible conspiracy theories, and he argued that the government should be infiltrating these groups and spreading all kinds of diverse information to, quote, unquote, spread cognitive diversity among these groups, and that at the end of the day it might be necessary to outlaw conspiracy theories.
Yeah, but of course the other, I think, fairly chilling background indicator is that we know that Wolfowitz and Pearl and others wrote this document, I've forgotten his name temporarily, about
Rebuilding America's Defenses?
Yeah, when they were advising Netanyahu.
Oh, that was the Clean Break document.
That's the one. That's the Clean Break document.
Right.
You know, and the strategy there was get rid of Saddam Hussein, roll back Syria, and attack Iran. That was all quite public. But we also know that Wolfowitz at some point was talking about the need for a Pearl Harbor incident.
Well, that's right. Wolfowitz was obsessed with the strategic value of Pearl Harbor, and he had talked about how the Nazis believed they would have won World War II had they had that kind of Pearl Harbor-style incident to rally their population.
Yeah, you see, I believe that the Iraq War, and I say this in my book, I believe the 2 prime drivers for the war were Wolfowitz and Pearl. I believe they were then supported and endorsed by the man I called Dr. Strangelove. You can guess who he was. He was Vice President Cheney.
Right.
And the whole of the neocons. And the reason why, you see, it wasn't an oil war. People say it was an oil war. I have spoken to oil industry chiefs, some of whom I know quite well, and they say, Alan, don't be mad. The oil industry needs stability. It doesn't need these kinds of upheavals. And I think that's correct.
That's right. James Petros has made that argument quite convincingly. I think the only available counter-argument would be that it's not so much the oil, it's the long-term geostrategy based on the oil that would make it important to occupy these parts of the world.
Yeah, well, Israel had another longer-term strategic thing. It needed to get rid of Saddam Hussein because he represented the only potential threat of challenge to Israel's complete domination of the region.
That's a very good point. And now that he's been done away with and Iraq has been decimated and poisoned and its intellectuals and scientists and technicians have been hunted down and killed by Mossad.
And probably heading for civil war.
Right. It's been taken out as a potential antagonist to Israel for a very long time, and now they want to use the American military to go after Iran.
Well, you see, that's fascinating, Kevin. I mean, I truly believe that Iran is not remotely interested in having nuclear bombs. But just imagine that they did have 4 or 5 or 6 or whatever. Do you think it's remotely possible that they would launch a first strike on Israel? Of course they wouldn't, because if they did, the whole of Iran would be devastated and wiped out. And they're not that stupid. No, the reason why the Israelis are hyping up Iran is to take away attention, public and political, from the ongoing Zionist colonization and genocide in Palestine.
Well, that's exactly what some of my other recent guests have said. Gordon Duff, who was on my show about a week or so ago, is part of a group of retired U.S. military people who are warning that, in fact, the Israelis want to flee forward into a wider Middle East war in order precisely to obscure their tracks, not only in terms of the ethnic cleansing of Palestine, but also in regarding 9/11. Alan Zabrowski, who's a friend of Gordon Duff's, is a pretty respected and accomplished...
Yes, I know Alan.
Right.
I know Alan. We respect him, yeah.
Right, he's come right out and said that it's a simple, obvious, as the nose on your face fact that the Mossad did 9/11. And so these people are warning that they're likely to attack the U.S. again in a big way to provoke yet another and wider Middle East war.
A false flag
to get absolve them of their responsibility for 9/11 or to obscure that issue.
But the conspiratorial theory is that Israel can't actually do Iran alone, so it would need to get a false flag operation going to force and drag America in.
Exactly.
Yinon Plan, the planned destruction of Arab states. Relations between Europe and Islam are ancient. At the end of the 19th century, Germany's attempts to create a railway to connect Hamburg to the Ottoman Empire exacerbated rivalries between the Anglo-Saxon thalassocracy and the Reich of Wilhelm II. This led to the First World War. The British couldn't bear to see this oil-producing region economically controlled by Germany. The Anglo-American victory in 1918 allowed the British and Americans to control the entire Arabian Peninsula. They were able to maintain their control despite much opposition, as in Iran, when Mossadegh came to power. In consolidating their control of this region, the British and the Americans took things to another level. The principle of the clash of civilizations, a term coined in 1957 by Bernard Lewis in his book Islam, was reinforced by a whole series of initiatives for the benefit of the Anglo-American world and Israel. We should note Richard Pearl's report, A Clean Break, a New Strategy for Securing the Realm, a report calling for Saddam Hussein's departure. In addition, we have the article written by Ralph Peters, calling for the balkanization of Muslim states. It is the article written by Oded Yinon that comes to mind. former official at the Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which is the most hard-hitting. The article was published in 1982 by the World Zionist Organization after a detailed examination of the ethnic and religious composition of the Muslim world from Pakistan to Morocco, Lebanon, Egypt, Sudan, Libya, and the entire Muslim world. In light of the aforementioned documents, it is not possible to believe that the famous Arab Spring was spontaneous, even though our governments are plagued by nepotism and corruption. Israel Shahak, who lived from 1933 to 2001, professor of chemistry and president of the Israeli League of Human Rights, gave the Israeli game away when he translated Oded Yunon's article into English. This valuable document is entitled The Zionist Plan for the Middle East. This document accurately details the policy advocated by Oded Yunon and how it fits into the Zionist strategy. The booklet states, this essay originally appeared in Hebrew in Kivunim. This document highlights the fact that the desire to disintegrate Arab nations was programmed some time ago, and this is why this document is so valuable. In his foreword, Shahak quotes Zev Schiff, defense correspondent for the Israeli newspaper Haaretz, who stated on the 2nd of June 1982 that the best thing that could happen to Israel would to see Iraq broken up into free zones. Current events in the Arab world should fill some Israelis with joy. The policy of disintegration also calls for a greater Israel, which was the wish of the founding fathers of Zionism. This is demonstrated by the map included in the document, showing the borders of the Jewish state stretching from the Nile to the Euphrates. One thing is certain, such a policy can only lead to Arab and Israeli conflict. Could this be the price to pay in order that some can achieve a new Garden of Eden in the future? The number of plans made by Israeli Anglo-Saxon policy research centers to restructure the countries of North Africa and the Middle East has grown steadily over the years. Indeed, we can compile a list of the works and the secret meetings which have accumulated over a century. Arguably, these geographical realignments began in 1916 during World War I with the Sykes-Picot Agreement, which paved the way for the dismantlement of the Ottoman Empire and the allocation of the territories to the British and French colonial powers.
It was a secret accord signed on May 16, 1916, that carved up Ottoman-controlled Arab territories into different zones of influence under British, French, and Russian control. The agreement was signed by two senior diplomats, Britain's Sir Mark Sykes and France's François-Georges Picot. Sykes drew a line on a map extending roughly from Palestine to Iraq, marking the land to the south and east for Britain and the north and west for France. Firstly, the agreement was signed to protect British and French regional influence in the area. Secondly, the British wanted to protect and secure land and sea routes to India. Thirdly, the division of the territories showed Britain's need for a northern French buffer between Britain's Middle East holdings and Russia. The Arabs didn't know about the division of their land until a year and a half later, when Russian newspapers published a copy of the agreement. The British had promised them something entirely different, self-determination and control of territories in return for revolting against their Ottoman overlords. Many consider the borders drawn up by the imperial powers as illegitimate, designed to keep Arabs weak and divided. The Islamic State group defied the borders to establish a caliphate across Syria and Iraq in the summer of 2004.
Good morning to all of you, the distinguished representatives of governments who are here, and all of you from private enterprise, and the many companies and research organizations that are assembling here, with Yigal Luna, the Director General of Israel's National Cyber Directorate. I want to welcome you to Israel. It's a country that has undergone many transformations. A few decades ago, the world was plagued by an incessant wave of attacks of airline hijackings. Do you remember that? You're too young, most of you. Some of you still remember that. Well, I remember that because I was on the team that forced our way, disguised as airline mechanics, into a Sabina airliner that was hijacked right here in Tel Aviv. And we overcame the hijackers. We had other such events. And to solve this problem, we needed not only an active policy of attacking the attackers, but also an active policy of defense. So we put Israeli high-tech into work, and we developed a door, a mechanical door. I mean, it had bolts, it had locks, real high-tech. You're not laughing. That door was amazingly effective, because the combination of our policy of storming aircraft, even if they were far away as Uganda, the policy of storming the aircraft when you can actually get to it, and conversely, defending the aircraft from allowing the hijackers to actually get to the pilots, basically made Israel immune to airline attack. And this success, of course, was followed by no one, practically. I mean, some countries did adopt airline security guards that we put in our planes, but they didn't really adopt this door until an event called 9/11. That's 9/11. And by March of 2012, every single American aircraft had these doors. Now we're being attacked by different types of attacks, and they require not mechanical doors, but protection for virtual doors, because our airlines can be attacked 100 ways. They can be attacked by ground control interference. They can be attacked by the systems within the plane and the communications and many, many other things. It is in many ways right now the most vulnerable, dramatically vulnerable system that we have. But as you know, everything today is vulnerable. So, and everything is under attack. I believe that civil aviation is the one area that requires the most immediate treatment for cyber defense, but it's one of hundreds. So what we're in the midst of right now is a change. What you can see in the story of the Israeli door to Israeli cybersecurity for aircraft and many other things is a shift from the old world to the new world. Here's the old world, okay? That's the old world. That's all of 10 years ago, okay? Here are the 10 leading companies in the world. They include 5 energy companies, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 1 IT company. Now shift forward 10 years, which is nothing, it's a blink of an eye, and you see this most amazing change. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 IT information-based companies, no energy left. All of these new companies, all of them, top 10 companies, have major research centers in Israel. Not research centers, major research centers in Israel. These are some of the 300 that do. And in some of them, for some of them, these research centers are the most advanced that they have outside their home country. Now, why is that happening? It's happening because Israel leads the world in investment in R&D as a percentage of GDP. It happens because we have more personnel, highest percentage of R&D personnel per 1,000 employees, by far. It happens because, sorry, it happens because we have a defense industry that we use to leverage to a civilian industry. Now, this has come into being into many industries have developed from this, but essentially what you're seeing here, this revolution that you're seeing from 2007 to 2017 is a revolution that is changing our world both economically and in terms of security. I think it'll also change our politics. And what it is basically the meeting ground between big data, IT, and connectivity. Everything is being driven from this nexus. Everything. Everything. For example, new industries are being formed. What's the first new industry that's being formed? It's right here in this room. It's the cybersecurity industry. Big data, AI, connectivity. Okay? There are many other industries that are being formed. Do you have the car industry? You have that? You have a car? Can you show us the old car industry we had? Yeah, we had a car like that. Okay? That's gone. Now we have Waze, we have Google, buying Waze, we have Mobileye, we have 500 companies, most of them started in the last 5 years, a new industry that deals with cars. Cars are becoming a computer on wheels, basically. And a computer on wheels, that's a new car industry, so we're in it. Big data, connectivity, artificial intelligence. Let's go back to cyber. That's the first industry because everybody else needs it. And here's what's happening to the Israeli cyber industry. It's growing, obviously, in sales. It's growing in terms of market share. In 2014, we were 10% of the market share of the global private investment in cybersecurity. By 2017, it's doubled. That's a very quick doubling. And it is now second to the United States. That tall tower there is the United States. The United States is bigger than Israel. But it ain't that much bigger than Israel. And Israel is number 2. Israel is 1/10 of 1% of the world's population, and we are receiving 20% of the global share in private cybersecurity investments. That's 200 times our weight in the world. What this revolution is doing, big data, AI, and connectivity, is allowing small countries to be big countries. It depends if you have the brains and the system to create conceptual products at an accelerated rate, conceptual products that are at the cutting edge and give you a competitive advantage. If you do this conceptual mousetrap, the world definitely beats a path to your door. There's no question about it. It's happening. But this requires constant innovation. For that, we have a machine. That machine is forced on us. And I'll tell you how I figured out that we need to do something about this. I went to school in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and MIT, and I lived in student housing. I used to go every day down to student housing, it's called Eastgate, to go to the Sloan School, which was about 50 meters away. And you're smiling, you were there too? Yeah? You lived in Eastgate? Westgate, whatever, okay. So you go down the elevator, walk along the sidewalk to get to the business school, and on the other side of the street, I see this big, ugly warehouse, opaque windows, bars on the windows. Now, this is in the MIT campus. MIT is, you know, they have IMP buildings, beautiful, beautiful buildings. And what's this ugly warehouse doing there? 1972, I think. Okay. Or 74. And they said, well, that's CIA, NSA. That's the first time I heard NSA, the words. And of course, what it was a government intelligence investment smack in the center of academia, which produced Route 128, which produced Route 495, and the same thing happened in Stanford, exactly the same thing, and produced the Valley. So my idea is, why don't we do that here? After all, our NSA, which is called Unit A200, it's pretty big. How big do you think it is? Well, I'll give you a hint, okay? America, the United States, is about 42 times the size of Israel in terms of population. So how much bigger do you think the American NSA is relative to the Israeli NSA? No brave people among you? 42 times? 40 times? Nah, come on. It's not 5 times, but it's not 10 times bigger. It's not even 10 times bigger. You know the 5 eyes? Israel is the 6th eye? No, Israel is the 2nd eye. So we have a tremendous sunk investment, whether we like it or not. To survive, you know, Israel is not that big a country, but it has to have a very big defense capability. So to survive, we need a very big head. And this head, we invest in. We take our brightest people and put them in. We look at the entire population. We go into the high schools. We're going to go into kindergartens very soon. Okay? So we need the smartest people. We put them in this. They run on the information networks, and then what? Then you could do one of two things. You can have a very, very constrictive business environment, and all of that goes to waste. Or they'll go to the Valley, which they did, many of them. Or they'll go elsewhere. Or they can be just frustrated, right? Or we can create a business-friendly environment, which is what we did, with many, many reforms, many, many reforms. And this created, of course, the Israeli high-tech industry, which is centered around conceptual products. But specifically, I decided several years ago to turn Israel into one of the 5 cyber powers of the world, and that required allowing this combination of military intelligence, academia, and industry to converge in one place. And where we're doing that is in Beersheba in the south. That's where you should have this conference. Have you been there? No? Who clapped from Beersheba? Good for you. Good. All right. So here's Ben Gurion University. That's the rail line to Tel Aviv. This is where we're putting our military intelligence. We're going to put even more of that. This is where you have the central command center for defending the country against cyber attacks. Here is the a park, cyber park, of some of the leading cybersecurity powers, and it's all within 200 meters walking distance. So we're creating in Beersheba now this complex that will encourage the same kind of development that we saw that I saw at MIT and that you may have seen in San Francisco. It's already happening here in Tel Aviv. We're just duplicating it there as a means of additional expansion, additional growth. What this means is that we have a sunk cost, but it could develop. What does it develop into? It develops into a business, enterprises, if we allow the graduates of our military units and our intelligence units to create companies. We allow them to create companies, and in order for the companies to develop, they need to make, what do they need to make? Money. They need to make money. Now, the easiest way to make sure that they don't make money is, one, high taxes, right? What's the other one? Regulations. Have you ever heard of regulations? We have a problem with regulations. So the policy we have is keep taxes low and keep regulations low. Minimize regulations. There is no industry more susceptible and more inviting of regulations than cybersecurity. It's like weapons. It is a weapon. And therefore, we made a conscious decision, I made a conscious decision, in order to have this growth of an industry that is going to be the biggest industry, one of the three biggest industries in the world. The biggest three industries, without a doubt, okay? One of the four, okay. It's cybersecurity, it's mobility, it's health, and it's food. That's it. These are the big four. This is inevitably going to be there because all the others depend on it. In order for this to grow, we want to have this as a huge business. We want our position in the world to continue. To do this, we have to make sure that we have economic partners. And the economic partners that we have depend on our ability to merge the graduates of our security units into a business community. And this business community relies on partnerships. You are our partners. This is why we're having this conference here. Cybertech reflects a policy. It reflects the fact that cybersecurity is not merely here to stay, it's going to grow exponentially. And it reflects the fact that what we have to do is to take certain risks and allow the graduates of our security services to merge into companies with local partners and foreign partners. In fact, we have so much growth in this area that we cannot meet the personnel costs. So we've done a program of cyber interns. If you haven't found out about it, you should call Yigal Una and you should sign up. Send some of your people to be cyber interns in Israel with Israeli companies. Secondly, I think you should visit this center. Have you been there? Here? No? You haven't been there? Okay. How long are you staying in Israel? You have to go see it. I have to tell you, I'm taking now foreign leaders to come and see this. They're absolutely amazed. There's no other word. They're amazed. Because I think it's a center like no other. We have monitoring of attacks. Iran attacks Israel on a daily basis. We monitor these attacks. We see these attacks. And we foil these attacks all the time. Iran threatens us in many other ways. They've issued in the last 24 hours threats that say that they'll destroy us, they'll target our cities with missiles. We're not oblivious to these threats. They don't impress us because we know what our power is, both in defense and in offense. But the important thing is that any country can be attacked today with cyber attacks, and every country needs the combination of a national cyber defense effort and a robust cybersecurity industry. And I think Israel has that, and has that in ways that are, in many ways, unmatched. I hope that, I hope that you have a chance to visit Beersheba, but I think that in, excuse me, in many ways, what you're seeing here today is something that is being replicated throughout the world. That is, people from around the world come to Israel, and Israel is going everywhere around the world. There is such a thing that I call today cyber diplomacy. If you want to see it reflected on a map, look at the blue. The blue are all the new agreements that we have made in various efforts around the world in the year 2017. I've been to Africa 4 times in 2 years, to South America, most recently in Brazil. We have, with the great powers of Asia, we have new agreements. Every single country here, in Israel's expanding diplomatic horizons, is talking to us about cyber. They all want to share in our knowledge of cyber defense. That doesn't mean that we share with everyone, and it doesn't mean that we share equally with those that we share. But we do have a general policy of cooperation between governments, and we have a general policy of cooperation with companies. This is why I encourage you to come here again. Come to Beersheba. We'll have to expand the facility to include all of you, or you'll just stand in line. But I think it's important that we can continue this cooperation for the defense of our countries and for the expansion of our economies. That's basically the message. So you're most welcome in Israel. You're very welcome in Israel. Come again and come to Beersheba. Thank you and good luck. Thank you.
Turning to the war on terror, federal agents raided a Massachusetts computer software firm overnight, and they insisted that an initial read today showed no threat to national security. But CBS Boston station WBZ-TV and CBS News have been digging into this same company for months. Jim Axelrod has what our own independent investigation found.
Hours after the president and CEO walked out, federal agents went in, raiding this nondescript building in suburban Boston, looking for evidence that could tie the computer consulting firm P-Tech to international terrorism. P-Tech's CEO is Osama Ziadi. This is him, 3 years ago in Saudi Arabia. He's pictured with a man named Yassin al-Qadi, a Saudi named by President Bush as a financial backer of Osama bin Laden.
Yassin al-Qadi fits in this category of wealthy Saudi businessmen who believe in and finance radical Islamic extremist groups worldwide.
In an investigation done by CBS station WBZ-TV, 3 sources say al-Qadi is the chief financial backer of P-Tech. Then there's P-Tech board member Yaqub Mirza. He's an officer for a string of Islamic charities which have been a concern to the U.S. government. This becomes all the more alarming when you learn exactly what it is P-Tech does. The company works in enterprise architecture, the blueprinting of an entire computer network. Computer consultant Indira Singh says such a company could gain full access to a client's data.
That could be rather dangerous.
It could be devastatingly dangerous.
Especially when you examine the roster of P-Tech's clients. The company's webpage lists the FBI, the IRS, NATO, the Air Force, the Naval Air Command, the Departments of Energy and Education, the Postal Service, the U.S. House of Representatives. Other sources say P-Tech has done business with the Department of Defense, the Secret Service, even the White House.
And that gives you a tremendous opportunity, if you're so inclined, to examine, manipulate, download all of the most sensitive information of whoever it is you've contracted with.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But tonight, the National Security Agency tells CBS News it is absolutely convinced P-Tech software is safe.
I'm sure that in the end they're going to find that there's nothing of interest here.
But experts like Matthew Levitt look at Yassin al-Qadi and disagree.
For someone like that to be involved in any capacity in an organization, a company that has access to classified information, that has access to government open or classified computer systems, would be of grave concern.
Federal agents may soon know if P-Tech is just a company with some questionable connections or a true threat to the nation's security. Jim Axelrod, CBS News.
Hello, thanks for joining us. Tonight, the international spy scandal with an Australian connection, and later we'll talk to South Africa's Foreign Minister Pik Botha, a man on a mission to improve relations between Canberra and Pretoria. It's a spy scandal that's already rocked the White House, an intrigue that could threaten the presidency of George Bush. This story centres on incredible allegations of spying on a scale never before imagined. It involves America's Central Intelligence Agency selling computer programs to foreign nations. These programs allegedly allowed the CIA to spy on the intelligence agencies that bought it. And one of the purchasers was Australia. We've been able to track down 2 key witnesses to those dealings, witnesses who are now in fear of their lives. Michael Holmes reports.
It may be the most bizarre spy story ever. A story of corruption and betrayal at the highest levels of the American government. A story of hostages used as pawns. Of the CIA spying on its friends. of murders made to look like suicides.
I think it's about time to get the whole story out.
His name is Ari Ben-Menashe. He's a former Israeli intelligence agent.
Once it's out, there's no reason to hurt me physically anymore.
And today, he is hiding in Australia, in fear, he says, of his life.
So many people in the last 10 years who were working for the various governments on these issues, due to cover-ups, died mysteriously.
He claims the United States tried to spy on ASIO, the Australian Security Intelligence Organisation, by selling it a computer program that contained a hidden keyhole, a lock for which the CIA had a master key. The computer software is called PROMIS. It's designed to track millions of pieces of information on tens of thousands of people. And it's alleged to have been installed in dozens of government departments and security agencies around the world. It's also alleged that American intelligence made some small modifications to the program, modifications that enabled it to key in a special access code and gain entry to all the information on the computer.
It would be equivalent to going into ASIO and reading the handwritten files of all the agents, except the computer has them neatly organized and typed and instantly indexed, so it's much more convenient.
Bill Hamilton owns Inslaw, the company that developed PROMIS and offered it to the American government.
They would not have bothered to sell it to all these countries without first preparing it in such a way that it would be an easier avenue of penetration into the files of these foreign governments.
The whole story might never have emerged but for the fact that the American government didn't own PROMIS. It pirated the software from Bill Hamilton's company.
We were dumbfounded, couldn't conceive of it.
Hamilton's contract with the US Department of Justice to supply the PROMIS software was cancelled in 1982 without any real explanation. Only some time later did Hamilton hear that his software was turning up all over the world.
I don't know how much Australia paid. I've been told that Israel paid $5.5 million.
Ari Ben-Menashe confirms that PROMIS was sold to Israel, but claims the Israelis, unlike the Australians, were in on the secret.
The whole idea was that we would study it, the Americans then would sell it to our neighbors, and then we could, by using telephone lines, get into our neighbors' computers. But then our American friends just took it a step further. They sold it to their allies as well, including Australia.
The list of countries which allegedly bought the PROMIS software reads like a who's who of America's friends, as well as its most bitter enemies.
Is spying on your friends considered a fair thing to do in the intelligence world?
Oh, it is. It's always done. Using a Trojan horse to go inside the agency, that gets a little aggressive.
It all sounds a bit too bizarre to be true, but we've now been able to track down a key witness to a prison near Seattle in Washington State.
So you are 100% sure that PROMIS or a derivative of PROMIS was bought by Australia to be used in our intelligence and law enforcement
Absolutely,
agencies?
because I spent several thousand man-hours of programming time with a programming team, developing that subset.
This unlikely-looking character is a computer genius. His name is Michael Riconosciuto, and he says he was in charge of modifying the PROMIS program so that it could be accessed by American intelligence.
So whoever was holding that master key could do what?
Basically, break into it and spy.
ASIO says it doesn't have and has never had the PROMIS software. Of course, it won't go into any detail about what sort of computer programs it does have, which is very handy because, according to Michael Riconosciuto, the PROMIS software was often altered and given different names before it was sold. Indeed, Riconosciuto claims he specifically modified the program for Australia at the request of ASIO.
I basically had to change the communications protocol, which is how that software package interacts with other software packages already resident in the computer system.
In a federal court hearing, Judge George Basin ruled the Justice Department had used illegal and underhanded methods to bankrupt Bill Hamilton's Inslaw company. He ordered the government to pay Inslaw $8 million. Trickery, fraud and deceit. You use those words when describing how the Justice Department stole the software. Do you stand by those words?
Yes. There's no question in my mind about it. The evidence was overwhelming.
So why was the Justice Department so desperate to get the software from Bill Hamilton? To answer that, you have to go back to 1980. Iran had seized American hostages.
All evidence proves that these people are spies.
If President Carter could secure their release, he'd have a big advantage in the upcoming US elections.
My thoughts and my prayers for our hostages in Iran are as though they were my own sons and daughters.
It's now alleged that the Reagan campaign made a deal with the Iranians, a deal to keep the hostages until after the election, thus denying Carter the credit for their freedom. The man alleged to have helped organize this deal is a Reagan political crony called Earl Bryan, and his payoff 3 years later on the promised software. About an hour and a half outside Washington, D.C., you'll find this place, Earl Bryan's multi-million-dollar country estate. If you believe Michael Riconosciuto, it's the house Promise bought. Now, we'd like to bring you Earl Bryan personally denying that claim, but he's not being interviewed by anybody. All we got was this letter from his lawyers threatening action if we so much as associate Earl Bryan's name with this story.
He had the contacts to help make sure that certain elements in Iran would not make a deal with President Carter in 1980, so that President Carter could not recover in the polls and that Reagan would win the election.
I, Ronald Reagan, do solemnly swear that
Just 5 minutes after Ronald Reagan took the oath of office, Iran announced that the hostages would be released.
Some 30 minutes ago, the planes bearing our prisoners left Iranian airspace and are now free.
And the story doesn't end there. In a moment, the murders that have been linked to the spy scandal. There are many shady characters in this story, spies, former spies, people with something to hide. But there are players with impeccable credentials too. In part 2 of this investigation, we meet a man whose background more than qualifies him to know a scandal when he smells one.
What is being said about this conspiracy points to criminal conduct much worse than anything in Watergate.
And Elliot Richardson should know. 17 years ago, he resigned as U.S. Attorney General on a matter of principle after clashing with Richard Nixon during the Watergate scandal. Today, Richardson is legal counsel for Inslaw, and once again, he has the White House in his sights.
It might be reluctant to have it emerge that the U.S. government had, through clandestine means, planted software on foreign intelligence agencies so that the U.S. would be better able, as the phrase goes, to read their mail.
The number of murders that have occurred to prevent leaks are incredible. There's nearly 50 murders that can be directly ascribed to this pattern of activity.
The Promise affair and the allegation that Ronald Reagan and George Bush made a deal for the hostages to be kept until after the 1980 election were being investigated by journalist and author Danny Casolaro.
He said he had it. he had some already, and he was going to West Virginia to meet the source who had given him that evidence. This source was now, he said, going to supply additional conclusive proof.
But Danny Casolaro never got to reveal either his source or the hard evidence he said was going to break the scandal wide open. On August the 10th, his body was found in this hotel room in West Virginia. His wrists had been slashed an incredible 12 times. Danny Casolaro's body was found naked in a pool of bloody water in the bathtub. All his papers were gone. Within hours, local police had declared the death a suicide.
You have a case of forensic artistry, shall we say, where you have professionally trained people that set up a crime scene, and they make it phenomenally difficult for investigators to backtrack, make a murder look like a suicide.
His body was embalmed by Monday morning by the time we found out. That is against the law in West Virginia. His body was embalmed without family consent. That certainly makes an autopsy a little more difficult.
Tony Casolaro says his brother Danny, pictured here at a nephew's birthday, just wasn't the suicidal type.
He was describing for me a few weeks before he died what he was doing and some of the people involved. And he said a lot of accidents had happened to people who were working on the things that he had been working on. He said, if an accident happens to me, don't believe it.
But bad things seem to happen to people who make waves in the Inslaw affair. Earlier this year, Michael Riconosciuto contacted Bill Hamilton and signed a sworn affidavit for Hamilton's lawsuit against the Justice Department. Do you believe Michael Riconosciuto did alter the software as he claimed he did?
Yes, I do.
Almost immediately, Riconosciuto was contacted by a Justice Department official and given a very clear message.
Back off or else.
Less than 2 weeks after that threat, Michael Riconosciuto was arrested on drug charges.
My main concern right now is staying alive and protecting my family.
Right.
And remember Judge Basin, who found in favor of Inslaw against the Justice Department. Well, a few months later, Judge Bason's reappointment to the bench, thought to be a formality, was blocked by the Justice Department.
Yeah.
His career has been destroyed. Would you still be a judge if you hadn't handed down the decision you did?
I think I would be. I rendered the, quote, wrong decision in the case of Inslaw versus Department of Justice.
Your replacement in the bankruptcy court was a lawyer who argued for the Justice Department in this case.
Yes.
Does that smell? Is that worthy of...
It's certainly an odd coincidence, isn't it?
Every time you figuratively pick up a rock, in this case, you find maggots under it.
Michael Holmes reporting on the saga that is now the subject of a U.S. congressional inquiry. Next up, South Africa's
Attorney General Elliot Richardson, who now represents Inslaw, says there's only one way to find the truth.
If there was not enough reason before to justify a full-scale, all-out, hard-hitting, impartial federal investigation, the case for doing that now is overwhelming.
Former Attorney General Ed Meese disagrees.
The question is whether there's any legal basis for it, and I think the people who have looked into it, including Attorney General Thornburg, have indicated there is no basis for it. And I would certainly have more confidence in Mr. Thornburg's judgment as an impartial person on the subject than I would Mr. Richardson, who's obviously a partisan and represents one of the parties.
A House subcommittee led by Congressman Jack Brooks has been investigating the Inslaw case for 2 years. Brooks has accused the Justice Department of stonewalling the committee's investigation by refusing for 2 years to release more than 400 documents relating to Inslaw. Faced with a subpoena, Attorney General Dick Thornburg finally produced some documents this summer, but told committee investigators some were either lost or stolen. Even President Bush is being questioned about Inslaw.
Fairly soon, I'd say.
The Inslaw case, Mr. President. Inslaw case. Are you going to
I know his views on that. He doesn't have to explain. I know. What was the last?
The Justice Department says it has been able to reconstruct 90% of the missing documents. But a source close to the Brooks Committee says there's no way to tell how many documents are missing or how important they are to solving the mysterious Inslaw case. Casey Wyand, CNN Business.
Case of heroin on a weekly basis, if you can bring it in under the auspices of a diplomatic pouch, there's a huge amount of money that can be made. And I believe that it's still going on.
Promise.
Promise is an interesting, again...
Who stole it? Did the Mossad steal it, or did...
You know, it's
Mises' buddy steal it, or who built the back door? Did Michael Reconshooter build the back door? Did the Mossad build the back door?
No, I think I don't know the answer to it, but based on what I have heard from the owners of Promise, from the people I worked for them, and I did the investigation. It was clear that they designed a software that was superior to anything that was there at the time, and probably even today, the advanced Promise. What had happened with Promise is that it was contracted originally by the Justice Department for their U.S. Attorney's Office to manage hundreds and hundreds of cases at the same time. The CIA realized that this has other capabilities. They've taken that, they told the owners of Inslaw, thank you very much for, we don't need it, we have something else. And unbeknownst to them, they took the software, took it to an Indian reservation, and in the Indian reservation they put a back door into it. Then they brought it back. Then Israel wanted to buy it. Israel couldn't afford it at the time. They stole it. Israel took it to Israel, and they realized, why don't we put a back door and peddle it to countries that we are the enemies and so on.
We got two back doors, or just one back door?
I don't know if it's two back door or it's the same back door, or he's already figured out there's a back door and we can use it and so on. But Israel became a vendor, a marketer for that to friendly countries and enemy countries who bought it. One of the stories is, and I'm again not sure that it's true, when we invaded Iraq the first time. If you remember the first wave of aircraft when they went to bomb Baghdad, there was silence, and the Iraqi Air Force radars went blank. So the whole mission went through without a loss of one aircraft. It is told that the radars, the entire Air Force, Iraqi Air Force, operated on radars that were based on the Inslaw software, and the back door was the one that the Air Force got in and shut it down before we went in there. So if there was one good use of the back door, that was the one. But it's an interesting thing. As you know, again, people lost their life trying to investigate it. There was a reporter that disappeared and then died, and there's a lot of it. A lot of myths was built later on into it and became bigger than it is. But what was clear, that there was a superior software that was taken by an intelligence agency, a backdoor was built into it, and it was sold to friendly countries and enemy countries, and to spy on them and see what they're using it for. That was clear.
And Maxwell was the...
Maxwell was one of the agents.
Who killed Maxwell?
Well, when you read Max, you'll have the answer. I'm not going to say it.
I want to ask you a question. Did you know Ben Rich?
No, but I talked to people who did. Now, I'll tell you what Ben Rich had to do with this. First of all, do you know where he was born? Ben Rich was one of the most the biggest Mossad spy in the United States. I mean, he got the most classified information. Here's what happened. Here's how we got messed up with Israel. In 1947, when Israel became a state, Jim, I keep saying Anslinger. It's not Anslinger. James Angleton was chief of CIA in Rome. Okay, they sent Angleton down to Tel Aviv along with some guys at MI6 to form Mossad. And for some reason, however it happened, James Angleton got allied with Mossad like this forever. He was the mole. If you remember, in 1960, he was the head CIA director of foreign intelligence, and he was the guy that always was looking for the Russian mole. He was the Russian mole because, you know, he was so friends with Mossad, he'd tell Mossad stuff, and Mossad would pass it on to Russia. So when David Ben-Gurion, in the summer of 1963, said, you know, we have to kill Kennedy. We have to. I'm tired of you threatening us with inspecting Dimona. It's none of his friggin' business. I don't want to hear any more from Kennedy. You kill him. He gave that order to Mossad and then resigned, so that he couldn't be held responsible for it. Mossad then went to Angleton. The Kennedy assassination was not a CIA job, but it was greased by the CIA only because Angleton was in there with his buddies at Mossad. And he's the one that greased the skids for everything that happened in Dealey Plaza and the escape and everything. They were Corsican sharpshooters there, hired by Mossad. They pulled off the whole thing, and everybody says, well, you know, they think the mob killed Kennedy, or maybe Johnson did, or, you know, Castro. It wasn't. It was Israel. And the reason they did is because David Ben-Gurion didn't want any more inspections of Dimona, and that's all.
And that's their nuclear, it's where they do their nuclear,
that's where they got
biological
the nuclear bombs with plutonium they stole from us, and other
But
things.
what's Ben Rich got to do with that?
Okay, so Ben Rich was born with a very wealthy Jewish family in the Philippines, and very highly educated, and he was slipped into Lockheed in 1953 as Kelly Johnson's second in charge. And he was there for the development of the U-2, and he was there for the development of stealth.
You know, there are a lot of Ben Rich famous kind of UFO quotes that kind of allude to things that technology, right?
Right.
Yeah, there's nothing of that in that book. That book's the inside story, the development of the U-2.
I understand.
And the SR-71.
But he did say, he said, what's the exact quote? You probably remember it.
We have stuff that would make George Lucas jealous. We could take E.T. home.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, he was an insider from way back, is what you're telling me, right?
Yeah, but he was a Mossad spy, and I'm going to tell you how they did it. Okay, now,
But on some level, if he's a Mossad spy, because the Mossad seems to be in cahoots with, if you want to call them, you know, the NASA Nazi group.
I'm glad you understand that, because when people say, did Israel have anything to do with 9/11, I said, as much as Santa Claus had to do with Christmas. So anyway.
So yeah, they're all working together. If you're telling me Angleton was involved with Mossad, you're telling me Ben Rich is involved with Mossad. You know, we've got the whole. There's a whole alignment there.
Absolutely, positively, beyond a shadow of a doubt. So now we get ready to build the stealth fighter, and this was the beginning of the real secret stuff that went on within our government. The Navy.
Heard about 911 before it happened. You heard some stories.
Yes.
You heard planes were going to be used. There were
Yes.
politicians all over America that were told not to fly on planes that month.
That's right.
I want to talk about the Israeli art students. You must know about that. Right?
I heard the story. I really don't want to even give it a credibility, because I don't know much about it, and I don't know. I know one thing. Let me just say one thing. The United States were totally complacent at the time. They did not believe that it will happen here. They were warned by Israel, by England, by Germany, by many countries who got chatter of information from the Middle East that something big is going to happen in the United States. You know that even American FBI agents have written to their superiors. There are people training to take off, to fly a plane, not to take off and not to land, things like that. There was enough there in a normal time for a government agency to say something is going on, we have to mobilize. Haven't happened here. And what really the obvious thing it was at the time, they didn't believe in terrorism in the United States. If you go back to the FBI at the time, the agency that is in charge of securing our borders and the internal security, they had less than a handful of people who speak Arabic or Farsi. That's not enough if your enemy comes from the Middle East. For the last 50 years, all terrorists came from the Middle East. So it was obvious you needed more people if you were about to listen to chatter, if you're about to read material, if you're about to interview people who enter the country, you need more than 4 or 5 people. So clearly the government was not geared to, even if you hand them a clear information. Israel was worried at the time, which they always worried, that some of those operations that are floating would be directed at Jewish communities, at Jewish synagogues, at Israeli companies, El Al, whatever it is. So Israel notoriously has agents that their job is to operate in friendly or foe countries, just to keep an eye on Middle Eastern communities that are notoriously very much against the West, against America, against Israel. And there's no doubt that there were Israeli teams at the time in America who were monitoring the activities of various terrorist networks, as they have done in the past and probably will do in the future. We are not relying on anyone else except ourselves in Israel. And there is a possibility that they were monitoring and very close. And that's why Israel had information that they were giving the American government specific information. There will be an attack in North America within the next 30 days. There will be a hijacking of aircraft, and those aircraft will be used as flying bombs. That was available at the time. No one took it seriously.
Urban moving systems was discovered in a white van that had checked positive for carrying explosives, and they were caught videotaping the collapse from their van in Liberty Park. And it just seems like they must have had prior knowledge, if not involvement.
They could have had prior knowledge as a team that was surveilling, knowing that something may have happened. I personally am not aware that anyone that I spoke with at the time that had good information that led to 9/11, that they knew that the Twin Towers were a target. They knew aircraft will be hijacked and it will fly into buildings. I think everybody assumed White House, more Washington, and so on. There was no information, specific information, leading prior to it that I know of into the Twin Towers.
How about that? They're doing the same thing today with Osama bin Laden, and that's where I've been getting at. Can you believe what you have been seeing on CNN today, ladies and gentlemen? Can you believe it? Supposedly, a CNN reporter found Osama bin Laden, took a television camera crew with him, went into Osama bin Laden's hideout, interviewed him and his top leadership, his top lieutenants and colonels and generals in their hideout. This is a CNN reporter with a camera crew. And he came out and told everybody, within 3 weeks, Osama bin Laden is going to attack the United States and Israel. Now, don't you think that's kind of strange, folks? You see, because the largest intelligence apparatus in the world, with the biggest budget in the history of the world, has been looking for Osama bin Laden for years and years and years, and can't find him. The FBI also, under the leadership of Louis Freeh, has been looking for Osama bin Laden for years and years and years and years and years and many years, and can't find him. Some doofus, jerk-off reporter with a camera crew waltzes right into his hideout and interviews him. And you know what his budget is? Zip, zilch, nothing. Now, that tells us two things. Either everyone in the intelligence community and all of the intelligence agencies of the United States government are blithering idiots and incompetent fools, including the entire apparatus of the FBI and all of their personnel, or they're lying to us. They're not looking for him at all. And the second is the truth. You see, the CIA created Osama bin Laden. They recruited him. They trained him. They found his leadership. They brought them all together. They showed them how to fight the Soviet Union in Afghanistan, and when that was over, they still continued to fund him and train him, and they're now using him to help bring about world government by making him the big boogeyman, because they can't use Saddam Hussein anymore. Did you ever hear of Osama bin Laden before you heard of Saddam Hussein? When did you start hearing of Osama bin Laden? It was after Saddam Hussein and Iraq were supposedly neutralized in the Gulf War, because they needed a new boogeyman. But they're not looking for Osama bin Laden, because I'm telling you right now, if I were the head of the Central Intelligence Agency, within 2 weeks I would have him dead or in custody without fail. Without fail. If I had those assets and that money, he would be mine. I would own his terrorist ass within 2 weeks without fail. A reporter from CNN and his little camera crew got in to Osama bin Laden's secret hideout and conducted an interview. If you don't believe me, tune into CNN. They're probably running it right now as I'm speaking. And if you believe it, you are one of the stupidest jerks that ever lived on the face of this earth. And whatever is going to happen that they're going to blame on Osama bin Laden, don't you even believe it. Another socialusion, social engineering project to change the minds and the attitudes and the beliefs of the people of the world, and especially the United States, to bring about one world socialist totalitarian government. Can you believe what they were saying for a while? That Timothy McVeigh, the CIA, the NSA, the FBI, the Defense Intelligence Agency could not find Osama bin Laden in their wildest dreams. But Timothy McVeigh and Terry Nichols could, and recruit him to be their partner in blowing up the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building. Bullshit! How stupid can you be? These guys didn't have a nickel between them. Not a nickel between them. How dumb can you, how stupid can you be? Put me in charge of the CIA. I guarantee you I will have him in custody in 2 weeks flat, or dead. Take your pick. Take your pick. Give me that budget, those resources, those personnel. I guarantee you he will be mine in 2 weeks. And you know what? If I had a few loyal, good Americans who were willing to donate enough money, certainly not even a drop in the bucket compared to what they really have in these intelligence agencies to really go after him, I could still have him in 2 weeks. So why do all these fools believe this charade? That a CNN reporter and his little camera crew can do what all the money and all the assets and all the eavesdropping and all the intelligence and all the satellites and all the undercover operatives in the world can never do. It's because they're not trying, they don't want to. Osama bin Laden is their creation, and he is serving them well. When in hell are all you people going to wake up? Are you kidding me? I mean, is this some kind of incredible joke that people are so stupid they'll fall for this? Do you know how much money the CIA and the National Security Agency and the FBI has at its disposal each year? Do you know how many agents they have that they can devote to this? Do you realize the technology that they have to be able to eavesdrop on every single conversation in the world? No matter how it's transmitted? And pinpoint the location of every one of those transmissions. And they can't find Osama bin Laden, but some CNN reporter, he just waltzes right on in there with his camera crew. Just like he knew where they were all the time. Bet you it was the CIA that sent him there. I told him where he was. And of course they know where he is because they created him. They're the ones that are funding him and backing him and helping him to create their new utopian world. Hitler could not have ever come to power, absolute power in Germany, without the Reichstag fire. Hitler was a socialist. He understood socialism. He understood social engineering. He knew how to get the support of the German people, and he did it by burning down the Reichstag. The Reichstag was, well, in our country, it would be the Capitol building that contains the Senate and the House of Representatives. So if somebody were to go and burn down the Capitol building today, they would use that as an excuse, as Hitler did, to round up all of the enemies of the New World Order, which would be me and most of you listening, and throw us into prison or execute us, declare martial law, and come to absolute and total power in this country. I wonder what Osama bin Laden's targets are supposed to be. And if they don't, if this doesn't materialize in the next 2 or 3 weeks, it will eventually materialize because they haven't succeeded in getting the guns out of the hands of the American people, nor have they succeeded in taking our freedoms away. In fact, there's been a great awakening in this country and a big backlash against these Marxist, communist, puke-faced, lying, subversive, Nazi, jackbooted Gestapo thugs that is gaining momentum. And so I can tell you with a certainty, they must do something terrible in order to stop this backlash and regain the sympathy of the mass herds of sheeple out there. And I'm telling you, one of the things that will give us the moral high ground and will begin civil war is the day that they begin declaring martial law across this country, taking guns out of the hands of the American people and rounding up American patriots. The war will start on that day. On that day. And there will be a war in this country, a civil war to restore, not a revolution, but a civil war to restore constitutional Republican government. Now, at the same time that that's going on, communist and Marxist underground forces will begin, or try to begin, a revolution in order to institute a Marxist, socialist, or communist government as a result of the Civil War. So we, patriots, will be fighting on two fronts. On two fronts. And you'd better understand which side you're going to be on. Restoration, revolution, or tyranny. I'll be fighting with the forces of restoration, and so should you better be. And supposedly we're not the only nation searching for Osama bin Laden. So the vast economic resources, the vast technological resources, the vast personnel resources, the vast networks and intricate web spun over all these years by the CIA, the FBI, and the NSA can't find Osama bin Laden, but CNN can? Bullshit. Timothy McVeigh and Terry Nichols could? Bullshit. So many people in this country have their heads so far up their ass, I doubt very seriously if they will manage to extricate it before they suffocate. What a shame. What a crying shame. How in the world could this country of all nations breed such a dumbed down, unthinking, illiterate, uneducated, stupid, ignorant population? Anybody got a clue? We're going to open the phones. 520-333-4578 is the number. Be right back. Good evening. You're on the air.
Yes, good evening, Bill. How are you this evening?
Good.
I had read on the internet today a couple of things about Osama bin Laden, too, with regards to the CNN reporter getting into his ultra-secret lair, whatever the hell it is, you know. And I couldn't help thinking the same thing.
Must be on the moon, huh?
Well, yeah, you know. Oh, well.
How'd this reporter get there, you know?
It's amazing how you have all the American intelligence agencies, British intelligence agencies, everybody's looking for this guy. And all of a sudden, you know, some clown comes in with a camera and, oh, now he's on TV. Oh, here he is.
Let me tell you something. If he's an enemy of Israel and the Mossad can't find him, then this thing is the biggest joke that you ever heard of in your life.
Yeah, exactly. I was actually trying to explain to some friends this weekend, you know, about how Osama bin Laden is just the next, I even said he was the next Saddam Hussein.
Yeah, he's the next
boogeyman.
boogeyman.
Find some dark-skinned guy and everybody can go, ooh, we hate dark-skinned people, you know, and hide behind this guy. And I actually think if anything does happen, which is very unlikely it will, but
no, that's not true. It is very likely that it will, believe it or not.
Well, I mean in the next 2 weeks. If anything does happen, what about the 4th of July? It's the 225th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence.
Yeah, what about it?
You know?
That's a good time for it to happen.
Yeah, well, I certainly hope not, but...
I hope not too, but I'm telling you right now, as I told you before, I'm telling you that something's going to happen. If it doesn't happen in the next 2 or 3 weeks, something terrible is going to happen in this country, and it's going to be a terrorist attack.
And we're going to know who did it.
And
we're going to watch CNN and whatever, and they're going to go, oh,
and it's going to be big enough that martial law could be declared, and it could start the whole thing.
Well, thank you for getting the truth out, and you have a good evening, sir.
You're welcome. Thanks for calling.
Bye.
Good evening. You're on the air.
Hello, this is Marie from Colorado, and you had posed a question in your program, why are people so dumb?
Yeah.
When I was in 11th grade, my American history class, Mrs. Sheldon was my teacher, and this was 1971, and so yes, I am approaching 50, and she told us, she says, whenever you read the newspaper or you hear anything in the news, you ask yourself 2 questions. The first question is, who stands to make the money from what happened, and who stands to make the power from what happened? And she says, and if you haven't answered your question in reading that article or listening to the newscast, then you're not being told the truth. And the problem is that teachers don't teach like that any longer.
Well.
And my kids never learned that in their class. And I'm the one who told them, hey kids, listen to this. Listen to what Mom says. Mrs. Sheldon told me this. And that's one of the reasons why people are so dumb, is because they don't analyze and don't instinctively think, this and this do not add up.
Well, you're right. You're absolutely correct.
Mm-hmm. And Mrs. Shelton, you're probably in your 70s by now, so anyway, here's to you. And God bless you, Mr. Cooper, for your program. And will you be broadcasting this when you're taking that week off?
That's up to WBCQ. They're going to determine what they broadcast. If you have favorite programs that you want to hear again, call them and ask them to play them.
Okay, we will. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
You're welcome. 520-333-4578 is the number. Good evening. You're on the air.
Hello. Good evening, Bill.
Yes.
Hey, this is David. Checking in from Rhode Island.
Uh-huh.
And I want to comment on your discussion about when they immediately after this mirror building blew up, in a short time after, they brought the building down and destroyed all the evidence.
Yeah.
And it wasn't brought down with the kind of bomb that allegedly Timmy McVeigh parked in front of the building.
No, it was brought down with shape charges on the columns, just exactly like what happened when it was brought down first, when half of it was brought down.
And it's just disgusting the way the average citizenry looks at this whole issue. And I'm telling you that most of the callers that call, when the time comes, they're gonna turn traitor, Bill.
Sure they will.
So I don't,
most people will, but there's an infrastructure of dedicated patriots in this country who will not. And
I agree with you with that, and I have made my pledge, and I continue to make it. When I don't care what it is, who it is, when you're crossing the line, it's lock and load.
Yep.
And it's going to cost somebody.
You better believe
it's not
it.
getting done for free anymore.
That's right.
So if they want to, waste 10 people on some kind of an ATF sweep, they better have the equal amount taken out with them.
Well, I don't.
And I know that's your attitude. I hope you use this time that you're going to spend, at your place, also to recharge your batteries.
Oh yeah, that's one of the purposes.
Oh, good.
Of course.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, and God bless you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Yeah, because I am tired. I've been working for so many years, so hard, and rarely, if ever, even take one day off to myself. And so, part of this is going to be sort of relaxing for me. Good evening, you're on the air.
Yes, hi, William. There was an article in the New York Times about Daniel Spiegelman, who supplied the weapons for the Oklahoma bombing.
Well, what he did was he was part of a group of so-called Aryan resistance army that was robbing banks and things and providing funding for the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building bombing. And part of what he did was he went to an American university and stole famous historical documents and took them to Europe to sell them. He's Jewish.
Right. The article was December 30th, 1995, page 9 in the New York Times. Let me ask you, where is he today? What is the latest on him?
Well, I don't know. He sort of disappeared after they discovered that the lawyer who defended him when he was convicted in court of stealing these documents and trying to sell them was not a lawyer at all. And so I believe that they overthrew his conviction because of that. He didn't have a proper defense and sealed the records, and he disappeared.
Okay, I saw it on your internet site where he was convicted, but apparently he never went to prison at all, I guess.
Not that I'm aware of.
Yeah, they just let him go. It's probably the Israeli Mossad. I think he's with.
Well, I think this was a combination of the CIA, the FBI, the Israeli Mossad, the BATF, and several other the German intelligence for sure, because Andreas Strassmeyer was a part of this. He's another Jewish man who was a member of the German intelligence structure, who was instrumental in planning the whole thing.
Right. Well, our government may as well be the Mossad, and Capitol Hill is Israeli occupied territory.
What you have to understand is this is not leading toward an Israel of the world. It's leading toward a Marxist socialist utopian, or they believe it's utopian. It's going to be like the old Soviet Union world government.
Whenever the media covers something up real well like this, the way they let Spiegelman go like that, you know it's the Jews who are behind it.
No, we don't know it's the Jews behind it, and I've never said that, and neither should you. George Bush is certainly not a Jew, but he's a part of it.
Right, he works for them. Yeah, they put him in office.
No, it's not that he works for them. You don't understand the structure of the organization that is actually bringing apart world government. The reason that they're able to recruit so many Jewish people to be a part of this is the Jews have never allowed themselves to assimilate as citizens, really, of any country. They're always Jewish. They always separate themselves. They always look forward to next year in Jerusalem. They believe themselves to be a part of a world, and they want to bring about a world government. So they're sympathetic to this whole one world government ideal. But the people at the heart and soul of all of this, and there are a lot of Jewish people involved, are what's called the Illuminati. George Bush is certainly not a Jew, but he's a part of it.
Rick Sanchez has been there throughout this morning for us. Rick, tell us where you are and what the latest is.
Well, I'm in that area, if you're familiar with this area, of where West Broadway and Hudson come together, right at Chambers. That would put us about a block and a half away from the site of where the explosion was. That area has just been evacuated because police have found what they describe as a suspicious device, and they fear that it might be something that could lead to another explosion. Obviously, there's a real sense of caution here on the part of police. Their fear is that there may have been explosive device planted either in the building or in the adjacent area, and that's why they're being so cautious.
We've heard reports of secondary explosions after the aircraft impacted, whether in fact there wasn't something else at the base of the towers that in fact were the coup de grace to bring them to the ground.
People don't understand. There may be more. Any one of these fucking buildings can blow up. This ain't done yet.
I was inside the building, waiting to go upstairs, and they just let loose. Everything just let loose inside the building.
So what you told me is that there was a plane or whatever hit the building, and then a secondary explosion.
It was like 3 explosions after that. We came in after the fire. We came when the fire was going on already. We was in the staging area inside the building. Could be nothing no more than this. You're in the building trying to help people, and it's exploding on the inside the building. So I don't think we get any worse than that.